Hi everyone, I'm Chris Yee, and now that Mike DeLisio works over at the Dice Tower Midwest Annex, I think it's finally time to divulge the top 10 disgusting secrets about Mike DeLisio. Number 7 will shock you. Number 10, when Mike sleeps, he only... Hi everyone and welcome out to another rapid fire roundup here on the Dice Tower. My name is Chris Yee. Today I'm going to be taking a look at 10 different games that I played recently. Some of these are reviews that other folks have done and I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on them. Some of these are going to be reviews that you're seeing for the first time. So let's go ahead and get started. First up, Paperback Adventures. This is a solo only, I guess you could play it cooperatively if you wanted to, but it's 2 players, and the rules actually say that you could. But this is basically a roguelite game where you're going to be playing solitaire. It's based on the Paperback deck building game from Tim Fowers. This is from Fowers Games. This is very different though. This isn't a deck building game in the traditional sense where each turn you play out cards that let you buy more cards. This one is more of an adventure. It is a long game. It takes about, I would say, 2 to 3 hours to kind of play through 6 different bosses. A minion, then a boss. That's chapter 1. You play through 3 chapters, so 3 minions, 3 bosses. Even though this is very long, I find it to be fun. It does that roguelite type of a thing where you can get stronger after each run through, and then you can go through again, and you have a little bit more to work with. This is played, of course, as I said, over multiple chapters, and so you could, and I have, just kind of paused, torn down, packed it away, and then you have a pretty easy time setting it back up and continuing at the next fight. This is based off of Paperback, which is a word game, so you're going to be spelling words out and splaying cards either left or to the right as you spell them and revealing different symbols. So it's a weird gimmick, and on top of that, this is the core box, and you have to get at least one of these other character boxes. And so these character boxes add some nice variety to the game because you'll have different characters you can play as, different enemies you can fight against. You can get as much as you want, or you can just kind of get one of these and call it good, because even just playing through the same boss and having one character, it's not that bad because you're getting like a 3-hour run through, like I said. This is a weird sell to say, hey, do you want to play a word game for 3 hours? By the way, it's solo only. But Fowers Games impresses me because they do things that are different, that are off the wall. Tim Fowers and Sky Larson are the co-designers on this one. I think they did a phenomenal job. The fact that this is a word game, the fact that this is something that you do something so different and weird, and it's this big adventure, I'm a big fan of it. I'm giving this one an 8.5. A seal of excellence because it just feels rewarding every time you go through when you think you're going to take too much damage and then you realize, oh, I have a clever ploy. It's not about creating the best word in terms of like length and funny words and letters and stuff, but it's more about creating the best word that allows you to use the right symbols in that moment. So I think that this one's very fun. If I have one complaint, it's that you don't upgrade that fast. But once again, I think that goes back to the fact that it is a roguelite type of a game. So Paperback Adventures, an 8.5 from me. One Earth is a semi-cooperative game, which right from the get-go makes me hesitant when we did a live play of this one, so you can go see that. It was a sponsored live play about 6 months, maybe a year ago. And I was surprised that as a semi-cooperative game, it actually worked pretty well. This is one in which you are trying to prevent too much carbon emissions and stuff going into the atmosphere, but every player has their own selfish ambition to try to build the biggest factories and build airports and stuff, which all have some pollution value to them, but will give them income and points. They also have variable player powers you can play with, which really give you a direction to go. One of them is like the oil magnate who just definitely wants to pollute as much as possible, but they will get a ton of points from it. I enjoyed this one. It was running the risk of going into that preachy territory, but instead is a little bit more humorous than I would have expected from this cover and from this theme. One of the mechanisms in the game is if you think that the planet is going to just be ruined, you can fund a mission to Mars and taking over the planet of Mars. And so if you reach that group collective fail, that loss condition, then it's either the player who polluted the least is the winner of the game. So instead of it being a full lose for everybody, instead it's kind of whoever polluted least instead of most victory points. And I like that. That dynamic actually really works for it. Or if the planet fails and someone has funded the mission to Mars, they're the winner. It's really weird. There's competing objectives. There's a whole kind of a political voting phase to this. This is a recipe that I looked at, read the ingredients, and thought, I shouldn't like that, but I do. It's not a phenomenal game. I'm giving this one a 7 because I think that it pulls off that semi-cooperative feel really well. People have their self-interest, and yet there's this kind of playing off of each other to see how that's going to go. This one's fun. If you are looking for something that kind of fits this niche, there are way worse games out there than this for this theme, for this production. A cute-sized little box here. I'm giving that a seal of approval. That's a 7 from me. The DC Comics deck building game is a game that I have a lot of history with. This is the second deck building game I ever got into, and I really was enamored with it. I played all the different sets, played the cooperative expansions, got the little promo extra sets and whatnot. And so it had been years, honestly, since I played a DC deck building game, and Injustice came through the office. This is based off of the video game fighting franchise, and so I was curious what changes they made. This is, at its core, the DC deck building game. You have a deck of 10 cards, you start with 5 in hand, you play them out, you have one resource of power that you can use to purchase new cards. There's a random lineup that does all those things that I enjoyed, and I was having fun playing this and reliving my experience with the DC deck builder. But I found that the additions that they put into the Injustice set weren't fun. They're thematic. You as players are going to be fighting each other directly. You actually have a board with hit points on it that you track, and as you hit each other, you can reduce each other to 0 hit points. You don't eliminate that player, they get a little penalty, and then you start playing again. However, what this set does is it increases the fiddliness of what's going on, because you play attack cards. There have always been attack cards, but they've always been effects that cause players to discard cards from hand or something to that effect. And there have been reaction cards where you can block attacks. This increases the amount of attacks and reactions 7-fold, it feels like. So every turn, someone is playing out a card that could attack you for 1 health, and so you have to sit there and say, okay, do I react to it or not? And then the player plays another card that does 2 attack for health. You say, fine, I play my reaction to block it. And then that player, whose turn it still is, plays one that does 5 damage. And you say, wow, I'm out of reaction cards. Darn it, I'll take 5 damage. So now a single turn that should just be playing out cards really quick, buying a new card, shuffling up and going again, has turned into this affair of back and forth. And when every turn is like that, it really slows the game down. I also do think that the DC deck building game has probably run its course a little bit, so to speak. There are a lot of people who really love this one. I don't recommend this set. I think that slowdown and that lengthening of the game is not worth it for such a fun, simple system. I still think the DC deck builder is fun. Not the Injustice set. This one I'm going to be giving a 5 because of no, actually I'm going to give this one a 4. Correction. A 4 out of 10 because I just never want to play this one again, and I'm actively discouraging people from seeking it out. If you're curious about it, go get the original set. It is much better, much quicker, and smoother, so a 4 from me for Injustice. Pathogen is a very thinky, abstract game, a genre of games that I'm not actually usually a big fan of. It has a black and white board, and it has pieces that are trying to complete one of 2 different objectives. And right there from the get-go, I was impressed that there are actually 2 different win conditions, connecting a board across from one side to the other, or building settlements in the 4 quadrants of the board. You build settlements by having 6 of your influence markers in one location. Those are the same influence markers you can use to try to connect one side to the other. That I found interesting, and then it had an asymmetric aspect to it where one player is a little bit stronger than the other, but has a smaller, more restricted movement board. And the movement board is actually shared between the 2 players that feels so potentially disconnected from the main board and yet so brilliantly intertwined. This is a hard game to describe. It's a hard game to wrap your head around. It's very thinky, it's very brain-burny, and yet a ton of fun. It's hard for me to really love abstract games like this. A lot of times I feel like you're playing until one player just makes a mistake and then the other player kind of wins from that. And this one feels like you are accomplishing a lot on your turn. You're not just simply undoing the progress that the other player made. You can work towards your own paths, and then at some point you say, but I have to make sure to keep an eye on what the other player's doing and try to put them into a little bit of a trap. Because you have this movement board where you have a shared pawn that each turn you will move to one area and then follow that movement path on the main board, you can kind of force your opponent's hand a little bit in a unique way, one that I haven't seen done elsewhere. This is going to be, as I said, a little bit strange to teach, hard to wrap your head around, but really, really worth it. If you can find a copy of this, and if you like abstracts, I imagine you'll like this a lot. And if you're like me and you don't tend to love abstracts because you just feel like you keep playing them wrong, this might be one to check out. I'm giving Pathogen an 8. I love the theme, love the asymmetry, love the look of this. It's not traditionally beautiful per se, but I think that what this does, the art style conveys a degree of thinkiness that is appropriate for the game. So I would check this one out. Pathogen, an 8 from me. Animated. This is a Disney game about creating some of the best animated cartoons that have ever been made, best animated films. I really enjoy that this is a cooperative but approachable weight game, and yet there's some real thinkiness to it. The main driver of the game is the card river system that you can see in Civilization: A New Dawn and Ark Nova, but done in a cooperative setting. There's only one set of the 5 cards. The further along that the cards are, the bigger the multiplier is for the action, 1 through 5. You want to try to take every action that you can at the 5 strength multiplier, preferably. However, there are times where in the turn order, you're really going to have to do something at a lower level instead. Or you might take an action that's not as strong, but it boosts up something else so that the other players around the table can benefit from it. It's got a good amount of cooperation in it. Every player has a specific animated film that they're working on, which is going to be just a little bit different from the other ones around them, but for the most part the same. You have to create the backgrounds, and then you have to create the cells, the actual characters, the animation that goes on top of the backgrounds. I think the production on this one it's stupendous. I think that the way that this evokes that idea of animation without getting into the weeds of animation too hard to the point where it loses the fun of the game, I think it strikes that right balance. This is what Funko games can do best. When they're really on and making great games, this is the type of thing that I mean. It's approachable, it's thinky, it has great components and a nice flair for that theme, and yet I'm still having fun with it, even though the mechanisms are relatively simple. My favorite part is the fact that the different animated films have different little powers to them, and that's where the most cooperation comes from. Let me spend this token from the 101 Dalmatians, that's going to make this benefit a little bit stronger for you, and just that idea of actually working together is very good. You can solo this and have 2 films in front of you, and it's not too much to manage. So Disney's Animated from Funko Games, this is a 7.5 for me, a game that I think you should check out. A little simple, not one I'm going to be coming back to all the time, but if you adore this theme, I could see this game having actually up to a whole point bump for you if you're even a bigger Disney person. This is one of the most charming games I've played in a long time, so 7.5. Beacon Patrol is a tile-laying game that's cooperative or solo. It feels in the same vein as Dorfromantik, and by that I mean I find it tremendously boring. Not just a little bit boring, but like super boring. This is a tile-laying game in which there's no pressure, there's no loss condition. It's just kind of play and see what you can get for your score. If you play it cooperatively, you can trade tiles with other players on your turn. Then you move your boat around and you can lay tiles out. If you play it solo, you don't have that trading option, so I believe you get an extra tile. This is one that I really regret playing solo because there was nothing to it for me. I feel like I want my games to have a little bit more tension and a little bit more drama to it, and instead you're just trying to surround tiles that have certain features on them, lighthouses or islands that kind of block your movement, so you're trying to not block yourself in, and you spend tiles to move your boat around and place tiles out. It's not exciting, and not every game needs to be exciting. Some games are allowed to be relaxing and calming, and some people find this game to be that, or Dorfromantik to be that. I just find this one to be unengaging. Now, unlike Dorfromantik, one of the things I should say to that game's praise is you have this whole kind of campaign evolving system. It still wasn't enough for me. I didn't find that had much growth. Beacon Patrol has even less of that. You can play with one extra module set of tiles in there, and that's not going to be enough to keep me coming back to this one. This is better not as a solo game, but even then, it doesn't speak to my taste. You might like it. You might even love it. But for me, I'm giving this a 4, basically saying if you feel it all the way that I tend to feel about games, I would avoid Beacon Patrol. A 4 from me. Thunder Road Vemdetta is one of the biggest, dumbest games I've played in a long time, and I mean that with all the love of my heart. Thunder Road is all about racing, like you're trying to win the game, but you're mostly trying to cause the most chaos that you possibly can. This is a maximization of excitement kind of a game, where you're going to be driving your cars around, smashing into each other, trying to shoot at each other with dice. It's a big, dumb dice-chucking game, but this is one of the most fun and exciting times that you'll have doing that, because the cars feel great. But underneath all of that, the cars and the action of the guns and stuff, the dice are really well made, and they have a good, clever system to them that's easy to read and easy to follow. When you bump players into mountains and they just go careening off the road and die in a fiery explosion, it feels great. When you hit someone with your die roll for your weapons, there's some smart little things to it, like the small vehicles are harder to hit. They don't show up on the dice as often, but the large one, as beefy as that vehicle is, it's great for bumping people off the roads. It's more likely to get hit. I like what Thunder Road has to offer. Now, I think one of the big questions people have is retail regular box versus the extra stuff. What I would say is that if you got the retail regular box, you have a lot of fun in there. The expansions are going to be sold by Restoration Games separately, and while I don't really have any interest in playing with the big rig and the motorcycle expansion, the one that has the variable player powers, I find that to be fun. But what I would want is just kind of the more stuff. So whichever expansion you find that has the extra hazard tiles and some extra map tiles and stuff, that's kind of what I would go with. That's what I would go with first. The player powers are also pretty great, but I feel like I don't even need those as much to be able to maximize my chaos, but I would get them. So in terms of trying to find the big Chrome edition, I don't know if you need it, right? First off, play the game and see if you feel the way that I do. I feel like this is dumb, silly fun that's totally worth it. Spending an hour and having that kind of chaotic feel. I know a lot of players have walked away from this and said, yeah, but what did I accomplish? I didn't really get much out of it. The game kind of just happened at me. And even though I don't tend to love games that do that, this one really strikes a chord for everyone just kind of standing up and cheering at the table. So if you want that type of experience, I can absolutely recommend Thunder Road in either of its iterations, the deluxe or just the regular. And so this, in terms of a score, I'm giving it an 8.5, a seal of excellence. I have a ton of fun with Thunder Road, and it's a great Thunder Road Vemdetta, great convention game, great game to have an uproarious time at home, wherever. It's really solid. Tiwanaku is a deduction game, something where you're trying to discover and trying to be able to infer information about a board. The board starts basically completely bare. It has a few little starting pieces of information on there. You move your pawn around and you discover the landscape type of a tile, or you can discover the type of crop that grows on there. Somehow, these people just are walking around Machu Picchu, unaware of the earth around them, I suppose. But that theme aside, the fact that it's an abstract deduction type of a game, I do like the theme. I do like that the setting, I suppose, that it ties into a very good production from sit-down games. It's easy to talk about the game in terms of landscapes and crops, and so I think for that reason it works. Now, it has a cardboard dial that you're going to slot a card into, and you're going to reveal some information off of it. It's a game that I imagine that you'll see an app for at some point. It feels like that type of thing, but the actual cardboard construct itself can be very good. Sometimes one of the doors could be a little loose, the viewing windows, I should say. I've played 2 different copies. One of them had a very loose window that you have to be careful not to slide open. That being said, when I played it on a regular one, I thought that mechanism, the actual physicality of it, worked really well. I think that the deduction of it works really well. And underneath a game of just deduction, there's also a good game. There is something to be said about moving the pieces on the board and setting yourself up for the right positions, gleaning information based on the other players. You can get a lot of points just from kind of randomly exploring or from trying to make correct predictions, and I like the both of those. If there's one downside, it's that I think that the mechanism where as you discover a new type of landscape, you move a piece up the tracks and you want to try to keep your tracks balanced. I don't know that there's a tremendous amount of control early to mid-game. Late game, sure, but your tracks might be so out of whack that you as you have the information to try to play the track game, it might not work out for you. That being said, I have a lot of fun with the deduction aspects of this, so I'm giving Tiwanaku an 8, a game that I really enjoy, one that I'll happily come back to, and I'm going to seek out playing. So an 8 for Tiwanaku. Dogfight, rule the skies in 20 minutes. This is the third game from a series that originally started with two Paulo Mori designs, Blitzkrieg, World War II in 20 minutes, Caesar, Seize Rome in 20 minutes. Those are two just amazing two-players games, and Caesar is also one of my favorite solo games, so I was very anticipating Dogfight when I first saw that this was coming out. It's from a different designer, Carlo A. Rossi, who is an established and well-respected designer, one that I do enjoy many of his games, but Dogfight for me falls short. This is much simpler of a game than the other two, and because of its simplicity, I find that it doesn't have that hidden depth that I'm looking for. You reveal a token, two players opposing biplanes on a circular track, reveal a tile at the same time, move that number of steps, and if one is behind the other, if they played a shoot icon, they will do damage to the other plane. In the most basic mode, that's the entirety of the game. You're trying to just kind of guess how far the other player will move, and you want to be behind them. And if you're perfectly 4 spaces away, then neither of you is behind the other, and you might have played a big shoot token, and you wasted it. You wasted 3 damage you could have done because you're perfectly away from each other. Or you wound up in front of them, and they're shooting you for 1. That basic mode, I was very disappointed with. I was incredibly disappointed with. But then I tried playing the different missions in this game, and the missions are better. One player, for example, is trying to fly in that same circle, but take pictures of different military installations. They're trying to do a spy run mission. They don't actually get to shoot at all. They have to survive from the other player trying to shoot them down or trying to bomb different installations. There's a few different of those missions in here that I think improve the game significantly compared to just the standard dogfight. There are different planes you can play with in the dogfight mode, and then if you do the missions, they have recommended planes because they have different stats, different movement, different firing potential. As I said, playing with the missions, a major improvement compared to just the standard dogfighting mode, but even with that, I find that this doesn't have the same depth and the allure that games like the previous games the line Caesar and Blitzkrieg had. I immediately played Blitzkrieg again after playing this a few times and just remembering how simple that game is and yet how many layers of impact each decision that you make has. This just doesn't unfortunately hold a candle to it. So I'm giving Dogfight a 6. If you like this theme, if you want something that's far more simple and less thinky, then this could still be fun, and it looks good on the shelf next to the other two. But man, this theme really pulled me in. I was hoping that this could potentially be the best of the 3 because I love aviation, I love World War I love so much about this, and it didn't pull off that for me. So a 6 for Dogfight. Tales from the Red Dragon Inn is a game that I almost absolutely passed on playing because of the words Red Dragon Inn on it. I didn't realize that this was going to be a dungeon crawl / boss battling type of adventure game, and even when I did hear that, I thought, well, maybe I'll try it. Tom spoke very highly of it, and I thought, well, I gotta give this one a try. This does so many things right for this type of game. It has fold-out maps that will have the multiple rooms of the dungeon that you'll be going through laid out for you, and yet you only reveal one little portion of it at a time, and as you finish that portion, you fight monsters, you chuck dice, you play special abilities, and then when you unveil the next room, the stuff is already there, but you don't really know what the spawns are, the monsters that are going to spawn on the board, and that creates some nice variety. This fold-out map, it works so well, even though it's a kind of a papery map. It's pretty good quality, and it just expedites, it speeds up this setup so tremendously. The story is funny because it has that good part of the Red Dragon Inn series. Humor, lots of zaniness and such, and the story is engaging. It's also not too long. That fits that good balance that a lot of these adventure games tend to lean to have either too little story or way too much. This one's a little bit on the longer side, but at least it's fun and enjoyable to read along. The adventuring, the actual playing of the game itself, I think is really well designed. The fact that your dice are going to hit, but you could roll better sides with them, or you could try to upgrade those dice. You have a few actions that you can use on a turn. You can use these taunting kind of turns, these boasting type actions, or your regular fighting actions, and you have a mix of those, and they create some great synergistic abilities. When you use a taunting type action to pull a monster out, and then you just wail on it, it lets you feel different. It also has a nice initiative system where you draw your initiative tokens one at a time, and you will have a half turn where you can do one main action. And then the monster will go, and then your character has a full turn where you can do two main actions and one joust or one boasting type action. And the fact that all the players, all the different characters have that kind of mix of initiative means that you're engaged more often in the round order, the turn order, and that you have some moments where you say, well, I only have one action. Which juicy thing am I going to do right now? This is a great game. I put this in kind of the same realm as Adventure Tactics, another great boss battling type of a dungeon crawl feeling game like this. That one is a little bit more geared towards children, and this one, the humor in it, in Tales from Red Dragon Inn, is a little bit more geared towards adults or teens or older. I think they both kind of fit in the same realm of approachable, not too hard to play, very rewarding, great dice mitigation system. In this game, you can also kind of store up additional dice or choose to spend them when you want. I think that they both have great mechanical underpinnings, or underpinnings, whatever the word is. Tales from Red Dragon Inn is great. I'm giving it an 8.5. This is a rating that I could see even going higher if I made time to play through more of the campaign and see more of it. Unfortunately, I know that there's only so many campaigns I can play through at a given time, and so I don't know if I'll get back around to this one, but boy, I really want to. So that's high praise from me for a game that I had no expectations going into. 8.5 for Tales from the Red Dragon Inn. So there you go. That is another rapid fire roundup here on the Dice Tower. Thanks for joining me, Chris Yee, the man supreme, MC Yee, here on the channel. I hope that you have yourselves a great day.